London, 1915. The largest empire on earth believed itself untouchable. The British Navy ruled the seas. Its army fought across Europe, and for centuries the island nation had been protected by geography itself. But then a new kind of weapon appeared in the sky. It did not arrive with warning. It did not march across borders. It floated silently through the darkness like a ghost. And when the bombs began to fall, Britain realized something terrifying. The battlefield had come home. This is the story of the Zeppelin terror of World War I, the first time in modern history that civilians became targets from the sky. At the beginning of the 20th century, few inventions seemed more futuristic than the Zeppelin. Named after German inventor Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, these massive, rigid airships were engineering marvels. Over 600 feet long and filled with hydrogen gas, they could travel enormous distances through the air. Before the war, Zeppelins represented luxury and progress. Passengers crossed Europe aboard floating palaces. Newspapers celebrated them as the future of transportation. Crowds gathered just to watch the enormous machines drift overhead. But World War I transformed every technology into a weapon. And Germany quickly realized that Zeppelins could do something no army had ever done before: strike directly at enemy cities. Traditional wars were fought on battlefields far away from civilian populations. But airships changed everything. Suddenly, no city was truly safe. In January 1915, Germany launched its first Zeppelin raid against Britain. At first, the attacks targeted coastal towns, but soon the Germans aimed for something far more symbolic: London. The British capital was not only the heart of the empire, it was one of the largest cities in the world. And Germany believed that terror bombing could shatter British morale. The strategy was simple. If civilians became frightened enough, if homes burned, if families died in their beds, then perhaps Britain would lose the will to continue the war. On the night of May 31st, 1915, London experienced its first major Zeppelin attack. As darkness covered the city, enormous airships crossed the English Channel under the protection of night. The people below had almost no warning. There were no radar systems, no effective air defenses, no experience with aerial warfare. Most Londoners had never imagined an attack could come from above. Then the explosions began. Bombs crashed into homes and crowded streets. Glass shattered across entire neighborhoods. Fires spread through the darkness. Panic swept the city. For the first time in modern British history, civilians were under direct attack from the sky. The psychological impact of the Zeppelin raids was enormous. The airships often arrived at night when the city was asleep. People described hearing distant engines through the fog before suddenly seeing explosions in the streets below. Children woke to collapsing ceilings. Families ran into the roads wearing nightclothes. Entire neighborhoods hid in basements or underground stations. The raids created a new kind of fear. Unlike soldiers on the front lines, civilians had no control over their survival. Death could arrive silently from the darkness at any moment. British newspapers quickly turned the Zeppelins into symbols of terror. Some described them as monsters. Others called them baby killers after women and children died in the bombings. Public anger toward Germany intensified, but fear spread just as quickly. Each night, Londoners scanned the skies for signs of another raid. Police officers rode through the streets, warning citizens to take cover. Searchlights swept across the clouds. Air raid sirens echoed through the city. And underground, thousands of civilians crowded into tube stations, hoping the earth above them would survive the bombs. Britain desperately tried to defend itself, but stopping the Zeppelins proved incredibly difficult. The airships could fly at altitudes beyond the reach of many early aircraft. At night, pilots struggled even to locate them, and even when British fighters reached the airships, ordinary bullets often failed to destroy them. The Zeppelins were gigantic machines with multiple gas chambers. Small holes from machine guns usually caused little immediate damage. Meanwhile, the airships continued dropping bombs on British cities. By 1915 and 1916, the raids became larger and deadlier. One attack in September 1915 caused massive destruction in central London. Bombs struck residential neighborhoods and financial districts alike. The message was clear: nobody was safe anymore. The British government responded with blackouts and anti-aircraft guns. Streetlights were turned off at night. Windows were covered. Searchlights scanned constantly for incoming airships. But Britain needed something more powerful. It needed a way to destroy the Zeppelins permanently. Eventually, British engineers discovered the airship's greatest weakness: hydrogen. The same gas that allowed Zeppelins to float also made them extremely vulnerable to fire. New incendiary bullets were developed specifically to ignite the hydrogen inside the airships, and in September 1916, Britain finally struck back. On the night of September 2nd, German Zeppelins once again crossed the skies over England. British pilot William Leaf Robinson climbed into the darkness to intercept one of them. Flying at night was already incredibly dangerous in 1916. Pilots had primitive instruments and poor visibility, but Robinson continued climbing until he finally spotted the enormous shape above him. He attacked using incendiary ammunition. At first, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, flames erupted across the airship. The hydrogen ignited instantly. Within seconds, the Zeppelin became a massive fireball in the night sky. Witnesses across England watched in shock as the burning giant crashed to earth. For Britain, the moment was unforgettable. The terror weapon that once seemed unstoppable had been defeated. Crowds celebrated in the streets. Robinson became a national hero, and Germany realized the age of the Zeppelin was beginning to end. After 1916, Zeppelin raids became increasingly dangerous for German crews. British defenses improved rapidly. Searchlights tracked the airships more effectively. Anti-aircraft guns became more accurate. Fighter pilots gained experience intercepting night raids. To survive, Zeppelins were forced to fly even higher. But extreme altitude created terrible conditions inside the airships. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Crew members struggled to breathe with limited oxygen. Engines became unreliable in the thin air. And despite all these sacrifices, the raids produced limited military results. The bombings terrified civilians, but they failed to destroy British morale. Instead, public anger hardened Britain's determination to continue the war. Gradually, Germany shifted away from Zeppelins and toward heavy bomber airplanes, which were faster and harder to intercept. The giant airships that once symbolized the future of aviation were becoming obsolete. By the end of World War I, the Zeppelin terror campaign had effectively failed, but its impact on history was permanent. The Zeppelin raids changed warfare forever. For the first time, civilians far from the battlefield experienced sustained aerial bombardment. The attacks introduced a terrifying new reality. Modern war no longer had front lines. Factories, homes, schools, and entire cities could now become targets. 2 decades later, during World War II, London would once again endure devastating bombing campaigns during the Blitz. But the foundations of that strategy had begun during World War I, with the slow shadow of Zeppelins crossing the night sky. The giant airships themselves eventually disappeared from warfare. Yet the fear they introduced never vanished, because once humanity learned how to bring war from the skies, there was no going back.